Arrival at the new base. The shuttle descended slowly, its engines humming gently as it approached the landing pad of the new base. The soldier, a young man named Alex, peered out of the window, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. His new assignment was unlike anything he had ever experienced. A new base, a new mission, and a new team. It all seemed so unfamiliar. Alex had been stationed on many different planets before, but this one was different. The base was located on a remote planet, far away from the usual places he had visited. The landscape outside the shuttle was barren, with vast stretches of rocky desert broken up by the occasional dust storm. It was a harsh and unforgiving place. The base itself was a collection of metal buildings, surrounded by high walls that seemed to stand like silent sentinels against the planet's hostile environment. As the shuttle touched down, the doors hissed open and the ramp extended to the ground. Alex stepped out, his boots making a soft thud against the metal. His eyes scanned the area, taking in the view. There was something eerie about the place. The air felt heavy, as if something was lurking just out of sight. He had been briefed about the base, but there were still many unknowns. A few soldiers stood near the landing pad, waiting to greet him. They were all human, just like him, though they seemed different, tired, worn, as if the harshness of the planet had already begun to take its toll on them. They gave him a quick nod as he approached, their faces expressionless, their eyes distant, private. "Alex Carter, welcome to Base 37, one of them said, his voice flat and emotionless. "You'll be assigned to a new team. Follow me." Alex nodded, his heart racing. He had been assigned to this base for a reason. But what reason? He had no idea. It was all part of the mission. He had been trained for situations like this, but there was a gnawing feeling in his gut that he couldn't shake as he walked with the soldier. The sound of his boots echoed through the empty halls of the base. The walls were bare, the air thick with the smell of recycled oxygen and metal. The silence was deafening, and Alex couldn't help but feel like he was walking through a ghost town. They passed several rooms, some locked, others open but empty. There was no one around. It was strange. Bases were always bustling with activity, but this one felt abandoned. It didn't feel like a place of work. It felt like a place where people came to disappear. Finally, they stopped in front of a small door. The soldier pressed a button beside it, and the door slid open with a quiet whoosh. Inside, Alex found a small room with a desk and a chair. There was a window with a view of the planet's harsh surface. The soldier pointed to the desk. "Your new partner will meet you here. Her name is Zira. She's from a different squad, but she'll be working with you from now on," the soldier said before turning and walking away. Alex stared at the door as it closed behind him. Zira, the name echoed in his mind. He had been told nothing about his new partner except for her name. There were no details about her background, no briefing about what kind of person she was. It wasn't like the other assignments where he had been given a full profile of his teammates. This time, things were different. He sat down at the desk and tried to steady his nerves. Something about this whole situation felt off. The silence, the lack of information, the mystery of it all. He had been trained for war, for battle, for survival, but he hadn't been trained for this. The door opened again, and Alex looked up, his heart skipping a beat. Standing in the doorway was Zira. She was tall, almost towering over him, with sharp features and piercing eyes. Her skin was an odd shade of green, and her long hair shimmered with a strange, metallic sheen. She wore the standard uniform of the base, but it clung to her in a way that made her look like she didn't belong. Zira's eyes locked with his, and for a moment, Alex felt like she was reading his very thoughts. He stood up, his hand instinctively reaching out in greeting. But before he could say anything, she spoke. "Private Carter," she said in a voice that was smooth, almost too smooth, like silk sliding over stone. "I am your new partner. We will be working together from now on." Her voice was calm, but Alex could sense something hidden beneath it, something he couldn't quite place. There was no smile, no warmth, just cold professionalism. She didn't shake his hand, but her gaze never wavered from his. Alex felt a shiver run down his spine. He had worked with many soldiers in his time, but none like Zira. She was different, and not just because of her alien appearance. There was something about her, something he couldn't put into words, that made him feel uneasy. He cleared his throat. "Nice to meet you, Zira. I'm looking forward to working with you." Zira nodded, but it wasn't the friendly nod of a colleague. It was more like the nod of someone who had already made up their mind about him. She stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. "We have work to do," she said, her tone final. Alex didn't know what to expect from this new mission, or from Zira, but as she moved to the desk and sat across from him, he couldn't shake the feeling that this assignment was going to be unlike anything he had ever faced before. The silence between them grew thick, and Alex found himself wondering what secrets Zira was hiding. What was she really here for, and why had they paired her with him? One thing was certain, this mission was about to get a whole lot more complicated. Unlikely teamwork. Alex sat at the desk, trying to focus on the data pad in front of him, but his mind kept wandering back to Zira. She sat across from him, quietly reading through her own set of documents, her alien eyes flickering across the pages with an unsettling precision. The silence between them was thick, uncomfortable, but neither of them spoke. The feeling in the room was like being stuck in a pressure chamber, where every move and every word felt like it could shatter the fragile calm. Alex kept glancing at her, trying to gauge what kind of person she was. But Zira was unreadable. Her expression never changed, her movements efficient and deliberate. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Zira broke the silence. "We have a mission today," she said flatly, her voice carrying no emotion. "We're to inspect the perimeter of the base. There are some unusual signals coming from the outer reaches of the planet. The higher-ups believe it might be a threat." Alex nodded, still unsure of how to react to her. She didn't seem like a typical soldier. There was something distant about her, as if she wasn't quite human. It made him wonder whether she was even capable of true partnership. He had worked with many soldiers before, and trust was always the most important factor in getting the job done. Could he trust her? "All right," Alex said, his voice rough with uncertainty. "Lead the way." Zira stood without another word, heading toward the door. Alex followed, trying to shake the feeling that something was off. As they stepped outside, the harsh wind hit his face, the dry, dusty air of the planet immediately assaulting his senses. The sky above was a dull gray, swirling with clouds, and the distant mountains loomed like dark giants in the horizon. The base, with its massive walls and watchtowers, seemed small against the vastness of the planet's barren surface. They made their way toward the outer boundary of the base, where a series of surveillance posts dotted the land. Each post was a small, weather-beaten building designed to monitor the area for any unusual activity. As they walked, Alex couldn't help but notice the way Zira moved. She was swift and silent, like a predator on the hunt. Her every step calculated and purposeful. Alex, on the other hand, tried to keep pace, but he was feeling increasingly out of place. This wasn't a typical patrol. The tension in the air was palpable, and the sense of something watching them made his skin crawl. But Zira seemed unaffected, her face as cold and unreadable as ever. At one of the posts, they stopped. Zira immediately began checking the equipment, her fingers moving with swift precision. Alex stood to the side, trying to stay out of the way. As he watched her work, he couldn't help but notice the subtle grace in her movements. It was strange, her alien form seemed so alien. Yet there was something almost human about the way she interacted with the world. He cleared his throat. "You single quotes different," he said, trying to break the ice. "You don't act like the others. Most soldiers would have said something by now. But you, Zira looked up from the equipment, her piercing eyes locking onto his. For a brief moment, Alex thought he saw a flicker of something, maybe curiosity or even amusement. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "I don't have time for idle chatter," Zira replied, her voice as cool as ever. "This mission is important, and I don't have the luxury of distractions." Alex felt a pang of frustration. He wasn't used to being dismissed so icily, especially not by a teammate. But he had to remind himself that she was different. Alien, someone who operated on a different set of rules. Maybe he was the distraction here. They continued their work, checking the equipment and scanning the horizon. Hours passed, and the silence between them stretched longer. Every so often, Alex would glance at Zira, trying to read her, but her face was as unreadable as a stone wall. Finally, as they reached the final post, Alex couldn't hold it in any longer. "I don't get it," he said, his voice low. "What's your deal? Why are you so distant?" Zira paused, her gaze shifting to him. For the first time since they met, there was a hint of something in her eyes, something that almost looked like regret. "I'm not here to make friends, Alex," she said quietly. "I'm here to do a job. I don't care about small talk or distractions. My mission comes first. Always." Alex swallowed hard, trying to digest her words. He had heard soldiers say similar things before, but there was something different in Zira's voice. It wasn't just about the mission for her. It was as if something else, something deeper was driving her. Before he could respond, there was a sudden flash of movement in the distance, a blur of shapes against the harsh backdrop of the barren planet. Zira's sharp eyes locked onto the figures, her body instantly going on alert. "What is it?" Alex whispered, his heart racing. Zira didn't answer. She just grabbed him by the arm and pulled him behind a nearby post, her movements swift and precise. They crouched low, barely making a sound as they watched the figures draw closer. "Stay quiet," Zira murmured. "Whatever they are, they're not friendly." Alex's pulse quickened. Who were these strangers? And why did Zira seem to know exactly what to do? The tension between them was gone now, replaced by a shared urgency. In that moment, Alex realized that this mission, this partnership, was about to take a turn, a dangerous turn, and Zira 4. All her coldness might just be the key to surviving whatever was coming their way. The hidden truth, the figures in the distance were moving closer now, their shapes becoming clearer against the harsh terrain. Alex's heart thudded in his chest, and the air around him seemed to grow heavier, charged with tension. Zira's grip on his arm tightened, her eyes never leaving the figures, her body coiled and ready to spring into action. She had become an entirely different person, focused, alert, and calculating. "Stay down," she whispered, her voice low but firm. Alex nodded, barely breathing, trying to keep as still as possible. He could see the figures, now two of them, humanoid in shape but with features that were hard to make out at this distance. They moved with a strange, almost unnatural grace, their silhouettes shifting fluidly across the barren land. The way they moved reminded Alex of predators stalking their prey, not soldiers on patrol. Zira's eyes narrowed. "They're not human," she murmured under her breath, her voice sharp with certainty. Alex's stomach dropped. He had been stationed on countless bases before, but he had never encountered anything like this. The thought that these beings might be hostile sent a cold chill down his spine. He turned to Zira, seeking reassurance, but her face remained a mask of calm cold, controlled and unreadable. "Who are they?" Alex whispered, though he already knew the answer. They couldn't be human. If they were, he'd have been briefed about them, just like every other threat he had faced. But there was no mention of alien life on this planet at least, not until now. Zira didn't answer immediately. Her eyes flickered as she scanned the area around them, making sure they weren't being watched. After a long pause, she spoke quietly, but with a firmness that left no room for doubt. "They're from a different faction," she said, her voice low and steady. "A faction that has been monitoring this planet for some time now. I wasn't expecting them to show up, but I think it's time you knew the truth." Alex felt his breath catch. The truth. What did she mean by that? "What truth?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What's going on here, Zira? Why did they assign you to me? And why didn't anyone tell me about these ... aliens?" Zira glanced at him for the briefest moment, her gaze as cold and distant as ever. But there was something else in her eyes now, something darker. "You don't know everything," she said softly. "There are things about this base, about this planet, that you were never meant to know." Alex's pulse quickened. Her words felt like a sudden jolt, an electric shock racing through him. He had been trained to trust the chain of command, to follow orders without questioning. But now, in this moment, Zira's cryptic words made him question everything. Before he could ask more, the figures were getting closer. Zira's hand shot out, pulling him back further into the shadow of the post. They crouched together, close enough to feel each other's breath, their bodies pressed against the cold metal. "They're coming," Zira murmured. "Stay quiet and stay close." Alex nodded, though his mind was racing. The need to understand, to know what was really going on, burned in him like a fire. Who were these figures? What did Zira know? And why had they kept him in the dark? For a long moment, neither of them moved. The figures continued to advance, now only a few hundred meters away. The air was still, the only sound the low hum of the bass in the distance. Alex's thoughts raced as he strained to make sense of the situation. But the truth, it seemed, was just out of reach. Zira's voice broke through his thoughts. "They're here for a reason," she whispered. "They think we're part of something bigger. They're looking for answers." Answers to what? Alex thought, but before he could ask, Zira suddenly stood up, her movements swift and graceful. Without a word, she signaled to him, her hand raised to stay hidden, but her eyes locked onto the approaching figures. They were close enough now that Alex could make out more details, slender, lithe, their skin almost translucent in the light. Their eyes glowed faintly, and they were dressed in strange, flowing garments that rippled like liquid metal. "Stay behind me," Zira said, her voice steady, but there was an underlying tension that Alex had never heard before. He moved closer to her, his heart pounding in his chest. What was happening? What was Zira not telling him? Just as the figures were about to cross into their line of sight, Zira moved without warning, stepping out from behind the post and drawing a weapon from her side. It wasn't a standard weapon, it looked more like a sleek, alien device, humming with energy as she aimed it toward the approaching figures. "Zira, what the hell are you doing?" Alex hissed, but she didn't look at him. She was focused entirely on the figures, her stance firm and ready. Without a word, she fired. A beam of energy shot out, hitting one of the figures. It staggered, but didn't fall. Instead, it turned toward her, its glowing eyes narrowing. The other figure immediately followed suit, their movements so fast that Alex could barely keep up. "Run," Zira shouted. "Get to the base. I'll hold them off." Before Alex could even react, she was already charging toward the figures, her movements fluid and swift. Alex stood frozen for a moment, staring at her, torn between staying to help and following her orders. But the danger was clear. He had to make it back to the base. Turning on his heels, he ran, his boots pounding against the dusty ground as he sprinted toward the distant walls of the base. But in the back of his mind, a single question echoed. What is Zira hiding from me? He didn't know what had just happened, but one thing was certain: this mission was no longer just a simple assignment, and Zira's role in it was far more complex than he had ever imagined. Secrets unveiled, the sound of Alex's boots thudding against the hard, dry ground filled the silence as he ran back toward the base. His breath came in sharp gasps, his chest burning with each step. He couldn't keep his mind from racing. The alien figures, Zira's actions, none of it made sense. He glanced over his shoulder to see if Zira was following him, but she wasn't there. Instead, he could hear the faint crackle of energy blasts and the low hum of something moving fast. She had stayed behind to fight, to protect him, and now he had to hope she would be all right. But the urgency of the situation was too overwhelming. He had to get back to the safety of the base, to regroup and figure out what was happening. The walls of the base loomed ahead, offering a sense of security. But with every step he took toward them, a sense of dread began to settle in his stomach. What had he just witnessed? Zira's weapon, the figures, they were all part of something much bigger, something far beyond the simple mission he had been briefed on. He reached the base's perimeter and entered through a security door, which hissed open automatically. The sound of the door closing behind him was a welcome relief, but the tension in his body remained. He looked around, hoping to see some familiar face, someone who could explain what was going on. But there was nothing. The base was eerily quiet, just like before. The feeling of isolation settled in again. "Private Carter," a voice called from the shadows, breaking the silence. Alex spun around, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. But it wasn't needed. It was Zira. She stood in the doorway of a hallway, her face as unreadable as ever. Her clothes were torn and scorched in places, and there was a faint smear of blood across her cheek. But despite her wounds, she looked almost detached. "You're back," Alex said, his voice filled with disbelief. He had expected to find her fighting for her life, not calmly standing there, as though nothing had happened. "I told you to run," Zira said, her voice low and emotionless. "You were never supposed to see that." Alex's mind was still reeling, trying to process everything that had just occurred. "See what, Zira? What the hell is going on?" What were those things, and why did you stay behind? You're hurt. Zira didn't flinch at his concern. She just stared at him, her expression unwavering. The figures you saw, they are part of a faction I've been tracking for months. They aren't just any aliens. They're a threat to both our worlds. Alex's eyes widened. What do you mean? Why didn't you tell me any of this before? Why was I kept in the dark? Zira took a step forward, and Alex instinctively tensed, but she held up her hand to show she meant no harm. Because you were never meant to know. This mission, the one you're on, it's not about finding a new base. It's about something far more dangerous, something much bigger than either of us. Alex's mind raced. Then what's the truth, Zira? Why are we even here? Zira's eyes darkened, her voice dropping to a whisper. The truth is, this base isn't just a military outpost. It's a key location, a critical piece of a larger plan. The faction I've been tracking believes this planet holds something powerful, something that can change the balance of power across the universe. I've been sent here to stop them. Alex's thoughts were spinning, and his head felt light from the weight of what she was saying. So you're saying this was all a setup? That we were just pawns in some bigger game? Zira's eyes flashed, a flicker of emotion breaking through her controlled exterior. You were never meant to be a pawn, Alex. I wasn't supposed to bring you into this, but I had no choice. I couldn't stop the assignment. I wasn't prepared for the fact that they would make their move so quickly. Alex stepped closer, trying to understand. So what does that mean for us now? If this base is so important, why don't we just leave? Why stay here and risk everything? Zira looked at him, her expression unreadable again. Because we're already involved. They've already infiltrated this base. And if we don't stop them, it will be too late for everyone. For the first time, Zira's cool, detached demeanor cracked, and Alex could see the weight of what she was saying in her eyes. The real danger was here. It was on this planet, and it was already too close for comfort. So what now? Alex asked, his voice steady but with a hint of uncertainty. What do we do? Zira's gaze softened ever so slightly. Now we fight. We take the fight to them before they can take what they're after. But we do it carefully. We have to trust each other, and you have to be ready, because this will get worse before it gets better. Alex felt the weight of her words settle over him like a heavy blanket. He had trained for moments like this, but nothing had prepared him for the truth. The soldier, he thought he was fighting for honor, for duty, was now standing on the precipice of something far larger than himself. And Zira, this cold, distant alien woman, was the only ally he had. I don't know if I'm ready for this, Alex said, his voice barely above a whisper. Zira looked at him for a long moment. Then her expression softened for the briefest. Second, you don't have to be ready, she said quietly. You just have to do what's necessary. In that moment, Alex understood. There was no going back. Whatever this mission was, whatever was coming for them, he was in it now, whether he was ready or not. Zira turned and motioned for him to follow her. We have work to do, she said, as the door to the base slid open. Alex nodded, following her. As he stepped into the unknown, he felt the weight of the truth settle in. There was no turning back now. Betrayal and trust. The air inside the base felt colder now, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the weight of the truth that had just been revealed. Alex followed Zira through the long, sterile corridors of the base, trying to push the fear and confusion out of his mind. Everything had changed. What he thought was a simple military assignment was far from that. And Zira, his supposed partner, wasn't just a soldier. She was hiding secrets, secrets that could destroy everything. They stopped in front of a secure door, which Zira unlocked with a quick swipe of her wrist. The room beyond was dimly lit, a stark contrast to the harsh lighting of the rest of the base. Inside, there were various pieces of equipment, maps, and data pads scattered across a table. It looked like a command center, but there was something unsettling about the way it was set up, like it was being used to plan something under the radar. Zira motioned for Alex to sit at the table. "We need to plan our next move," she said, her voice calm, but there was an edge to it. "We don't have much time before they make their move." Alex sat down, feeling the weight of the situation settling in. "What exactly are they after?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "What's so important about this base?" Zira didn't answer immediately. Instead, she activated a data pad and pulled up a holographic map of the planet. A flashing red dot appeared on the map right. "In the heart of the base, the core," Zira said, her voice low. "This is what they're after. The core of this planet. It holds energy beyond anything we've ever encountered. If they get to it first, they'll have the power to control everything." Alex leaned forward, trying to absorb the information. "What kind of energy? And why didn't anyone tell me about this?" Zira's eyes hardened. "The higher-ups kept it from you for a reason. They didn't want anyone to know just how dangerous this planet really is. They thought they could contain it, control it. But they were wrong." Alex's mind raced. The energy from the core could change everything. It could give whoever controlled it unimaginable power. "So, what's our plan now?" he asked. Zira's gaze shifted toward the door. "We have to get to the core before they do, but it won't be easy. There are others here, people who are working with them, and they'll stop at nothing to make sure we fail." Alex's stomach tightened. "You mean there's a mole in the base?" Zira's eyes flashed, a hint of something dangerous lurking beneath her calm exterior. "Yes, and I have a feeling we know who it is." Before Alex could ask more, a loud alarm blared, echoing through the base. The red lights flickered on, bathing the room in an ominous glow. Zira didn't hesitate. She jumped to her feet, her movements fluid and practiced. "Get to the armory now," she commanded. Alex didn't ask questions. He followed her as she sprinted down the corridor, her footsteps light but quick. As they turned a corner, they nearly collided with another soldier, one that Alex had seen earlier but hadn't spoken to. The soldier's face was pale, his eyes wide with panic. "Zira, it's happening," he gasped, breathing heavily. "They've breached the security systems. They're already inside the base." Zira's eyes narrowed. "Damn it," she muttered under her breath. "I knew it. The mole." Before Alex could react, Zira grabbed the soldier by the collar and shoved him against the wall, her eyes blazing with fury. "Who's the traitor?" she demanded. The soldier, shaking, stammered, I don't know, but they've already gotten to the core. We need to stop them." Zira let go of him with a shove and turned to Alex. "We're running out of time. Follow me." Alex barely had time to think before Zira was already leading him down the hall again, faster this time, with purpose in her every step. They reached the armory, and Zira quickly punched in a code, opening the heavy door. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of metal and weaponry. "Grab what you can," Zira instructed, her voice now laced with urgency. "We need to move fast." Alex quickly grabbed a rifle and a few grenades, securing them to his vest. He glanced at Zira, who was already loading her own weapon with precise efficiency. There was no time for hesitation now. The base was under attack, and they had to act fast to stop whoever was behind it. As they left the armory, Alex's thoughts raced. Who could be working with the enemy, and how could they have gotten this far inside the base without anyone noticing? Zira moved ahead, her eyes scanning the area as they crept through the darkened halls. The base was eerily quiet now. The only sound their footsteps echoing off the walls. We're close. Zira whispered, her voice low. We need to take out the guards at the core room. Once we're inside, it's a race against time. Alex nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He was in this now, fully involved, and there was no turning back. But something about the situation felt wrong. Zira had been so calm, so focused. Was it possible she was hiding even more from him? What if the real betrayal had already happened, and he was just too blind to see it? As they approached the door to the core room, Alex's mind was filled with questions. But there was no time for answers now. They had to stop whatever was happening at the core, or it would be the end of everything. Zira signaled for him to stay quiet as they reached the door. They were almost there. The final showdown. The door to the core room loomed ahead, an imposing metal barrier standing between them and whatever lay inside. The lights in the hall flickered, casting strange shadows that seemed to stretch and distort, adding to the oppressive atmosphere. Alex's pulse raced in his ears, the quiet buzz of the alarm ringing in the back of his mind. Zira motioned for Alex to stay back as she approached the door, her movements smooth and silent. She pulled a small device from her belt, pressing a series of buttons that triggered a soft click from the door. It slid open just enough for them to slip through. Inside, the room was dimly lit, bathed in the eerie glow of a central power core. The core itself was a massive, cylindrical structure, pulsating with an otherworldly energy that filled the room with a low hum. Alex felt the power radiating from it, almost as if the very air was charged with electricity. Zira's eyes scanned the room, her expression unreadable. She raised her weapon, her eyes narrowing as she stepped forward, inching closer to the center of the room. They're here, she whispered, her voice low and steady. Alex's hand instinctively went to his rifle, his fingers gripping the cool metal. His breath caught in his throat as he noticed the shadowy figures standing by the core. They were humanoid but distinctly alien, their pale, elongated faces illuminated by the core's glow. There were 4 of them, each wearing dark armor that seemed to absorb the light around them. Zira's grip tightened on her weapon. Get ready, we move on my signal. But before she could give the order, one of the figures turned toward them, its eyes glowing bright and sharp in the darkness. A shiver ran down Alex's spine as the alien stepped forward, its movements fluid and purposeful. You shouldn't have come, the alien's voice echoed in the room. It wasn't in a language Alex recognized, but he could somehow understand its meaning, as if the words were transferred directly into his mind. Zira's face hardened. We've come to stop you, she snapped, raising her weapon. Stay out of our way. The alien didn't respond immediately, instead tilting its head slightly, studying them with an unsettling calm. Then it raised its arm, and Alex's heart dropped as a flash of energy shot toward them. Zira reacted instantly, diving to the side and firing her weapon in a smooth, practiced motion. The blast of energy from her gun collided with the alien's, creating an explosion of light and sound that reverberated through the room. Alex barely had time to react before the remaining aliens advanced. Zira's shots kept them at bay for a moment, but there were too many of them. Alex's training kicked in as he joined the fray, firing his rifle in quick, calculated bursts. The aliens dodged with ease, moving faster than Alex had anticipated, their bodies shifting and blurring like shadows. "Keep moving," Zira shouted over the chaos, her voice cutting through the noise. She leaped behind a support pillar, reloading her weapon, and Alex followed, his heart hammering in his chest. They were outnumbered, and the aliens were faster, more skilled than anything Alex had ever faced. But there was something else in the room, something that didn't belong. He could feel it. This wasn't just about the aliens. There was a deeper purpose to this fight, and he had a sinking feeling that Zira knew more than she was letting. On. Zira fired another round at the advancing aliens. One of them stumbled backward, and Alex caught a glimpse of something hidden beneath its Armoran insignia, a symbol he recognized, the mole. He shouted, his voice breaking through the chaos. "It's you. You've been working with them all along." Zira froze, her eyes widening for a split second. In that moment, everything fell into place. The cold detachment, the secrets she had kept from him. The truth was far more twisted than he had imagined. She looked at him, her face a mask of coldness. "You were never supposed to know," she said softly, "but now you do." Before Alex could respond, the alien with the insignia stepped forward, its glowing eyes now locked onto him. "Zira," it said in the same strange, mental voice, "you have failed." Zira's gaze flickered briefly, a flash of regret crossing her face before it was replaced by a cold resolve. She raised her weapon again, but this time she wasn't aiming at the aliens. She was aiming at Alex. Everything happened in an instant. Alex barely had time to react as the blast from Zira's weapon sent him crashing to the ground. The pain was immediate, sharp, but it didn't last long. As he tried to push himself up, he realized something. Zira had missed. Her shot had been a warning, not a fatal blow. Zira's voice rang out over the stillness of the room. "Get up, Alex. You're not dead yet." Confusion clouded his thoughts, but he did as she said, pushing himself to his feet. As he stood, he saw that Zira was facing the alien with the insignia. She lowered her weapon, her posture tense but resolute. "You made a mistake," Zira said, her voice calm, but there was an underlying bitterness in her words. "You should have killed me when you had the chance." The alien tilted its head, studying her. "We underestimated you, Zira, but it's too late. The core is already ours." Zira's eyes narrowed, and Alex could see the weight of her decision settling over her. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore, it was a battle for control. And Zira had just made her choice. Without warning, she hurled a grenade toward the core. The explosion was deafening, sending a shockwave through the room. The core flickered, its light dimming, and for a moment, everything was silent. Alex blinked, his ears ringing. He looked around to see the alien stagger, disoriented by the blast. Zira stood in the middle of the room, her expression unreadable. The fight wasn't over, not yet. But they had just bought themselves some time. The real battle, the one for control of the core, had only just begun. Zira turned to Alex, her eyes locked onto his with a quiet intensity. "We're not done yet," she said, her voice low and steady. "But this is where we stop pretending. From here on out, we do it my way." Alex stared at her, unsure of what to believe. Everything had changed. The stakes were higher than he. could have imagined, and now he had to decide, could he trust Zira? Or was he just another pawn in a game far bigger than he ever thought possible? New beginnings. The room was thick with the smoke from the grenade blast, and the air tasted like electricity. The flickering glow of the core, now dimmed but still alive, cast strange shadows across the walls. The alien figures, disoriented but recovering, began to move again, their glowing eyes now full of fury. Zira, her face still emotionless, didn't seem to care. She stepped forward, her stance unwavering, the weight of everything she had just said hanging in the air between them. Alex's heart pounded in his chest, but this time there was no fear in his chest. It was a strange, uneasy calm. He had made it this far, and no matter how twisted this mission had become, he wasn't going to back down. He couldn't afford to. "You're right," Alex said, his voice steady, though his mind still raced. "With the consequences of everything that had happened, it's your way from here on out. But what happens next? What do we do now?" Zira glanced over her shoulder, her eyes narrowing as she assessed the situation. The alien figures were regrouping, readying themselves for another assault. But this time, Alex could see something in their eyes, a flicker of doubt. The core was still under threat, and they knew it. "We stop them, once and for all," Zira replied, her voice cold and determined. "But we do it on our terms. No more hiding, no more secrets." Before Alex could ask what she meant, Zira moved, her actions swift and precise. She aimed her weapon at the remaining alien, firing in quick bursts. Each shot hit its mark, sending the figures staggering back, their bodies convulsing as the energy from Zira's weapon overloaded their systems. It wasn't just a fight for survival anymore, it was a war to protect the planet, to protect everything they had worked for. The remaining aliens, weakened but not yet defeated, began to regroup, their eyes glowing brighter with each passing second. Alex raised his rifle, taking aim. He could feel the tension building again, but this time he wasn't afraid. This wasn't just about the mission, it was personal now. The trust he had placed in Zira, the secrets she had kept, all of it had led to this moment. Zira moved with precision, her every move calculated. "There's one last thing we need to do," she said, her voice steady, as if she was simply stating a fact. "The core is what they're after, but it's also what we need to stop them. We can't let them control it." Alex nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. They were both in this together now. No more doubts, no more secrets. They moved together, side by side, toward the heart of the room where the core pulsed ominously. The walls seemed to tremble as they approached, the power of the core calling to them, trying to pull them in. Alex felt the weight of its energy, as if it were alive, as if it could consume them both. Zira glanced at him, her eyes focused, determined. "We have to destroy it. It's the only way." Alex hesitated for a moment, his gaze flickering toward the alien figures who were slowly recovering. But then he saw something in Zira's eyes, a flicker of vulnerability. For the first time since meeting her, he saw her as someone who wasn't just a soldier with a mission. She was a person, someone who had carried the weight of this secret alone for far too long. "I'm with you," Alex said, his voice firm. He couldn't back down now, not after everything that had happened. With a final glance at the core, Zira moved quickly, pulling out a small device from her belt. She attached it to the core's control panel, and Alex watched as the countdown began. The alien figures, now realizing what they were up against, rushed toward them. But it was too late. The core began to hum loudly, the energy inside it building to a dangerous crescendo. Zira stepped back, her eyes fixed on the panel as the timer ticked down. "Time's up," she said softly. The explosion that followed was deafening. A burst of light and energy erupted from the core, sending a shockwave through the room. Alex was thrown back, his body slamming against the cold floor as the world around him seemed to shatter. For a moment, everything went black. When Alex regained consciousness, he was lying on the cold, metallic floor of the room. His ears rang, and the smell of burning metal filled the air. He blinked, trying to clear his vision, and looked up to find Zira kneeling beside him. "Is it done?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Zira nodded, her face showing the first hint of emotion since they had met. "It's over." The core was gone, its energy dissipated into the void, leaving nothing but rubble and silence in its wake. The alien figures had been defeated, their bodies crumpled on the floor. Lifeless. Alex slowly got to his feet, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. He looked at Zira, her eyes meeting his with a new understanding. There was no more secrecy between them, no more lies. What had begun as a mission had turned into something much more complicated, something that had tested their loyalty, their trust, and their ability to survive. "We did it," Alex said, his voice a mix of relief and exhaustion. Zira didn't respond immediately. Instead, she reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. For the first time, her touch wasn't cold. It was firm, reassuring. "We did," she said quietly. "But this isn't the end, Alex. There's always more. Always another fight." Alex nodded, understanding the weight of her words. But for now, at least, they had won. And that was enough. As they stood in the wreckage of the core room, Alex couldn't help but think that this was just the beginning. Whatever came next, he knew one thing for certain. Zira had become something more than just a partner. She had become someone he could trust, someone he could count on, even in the darkest of times. And that, in the end, was the real victory.